Hello my friends, it's the Range Ronin, and today I bring you something different. Today is a montage of some of the range footage from a few of the firearms that I have reviewed. In particular, I have the Uberti 1858 Remington New Army Conversion Revolver, the High Point 4595 TS Carbine, the CZ USA 97B, the Glock G45 9mm crossover, the Glock G22 and 40 Smith & Wesson, an early version of the Ruger Charger, the Ruger SR 1911 Lightweight Commander in 45 ACP, the Springfield Armory XDm 10 in 5.25 inch barrel, the Springfield Armory Ronin 4.25 inch and 9mm. So, let's get going with the presentation. Manipulating an operating handle that is placed on the left side of the firearm can be a challenge if you are right-hand dominant, as I am. Obviously, one should operate their firearm under safe conditions to completely familiarize themselves with how to safely operate the firearm. For me, since I am a right-hand dominant left-side shooter of long guns, magazine changes are performed by rotating the top of the Hi-Point 4595 TS slightly outward from my body while holding the grip and pressing the firearm into my side. The trigger finger presses the magazine release button, while the strong hand strips the spent magazine out and feeds the fresh magazine into the magazine well. I have also found that it is easier for me to rotate the top of the firearm toward me until the operating handle is facing up slightly. Then come over the top with my working hand. In my case, this is my strong hand, pulling the charging handle slightly to the rear until I hear a click, the hold open lever being pulled down by the spring tension, and then quickly releasing the operating handle so that I don't ride the slide to release the bolt. The operating handle is not that easy to release, regardless of the hand used. It is all a matter of knowing what the left hand and right hands need to do. I have read where some think that the Hi-Point 4595 TS is heavy. The Hi-Point 4595 TS weighs 7 pounds unloaded. The Auto Ordnance 1927 Thompson weighs 13 pounds unloaded. Consider, also, that the Beretta CX4 Storm weighs about 5.675 pounds unloaded. The Ruger AR-556, which fires a more powerful round, weighs in at a mere 6.85 pounds dry. You might consider the Century Arms RAS-47, 100% American-made AK variant, heavy at 7.55 pounds, unloaded. For giggles, throw in the Henry Big Boy, lever-action rifle in .45 Colt that weighs in at 8.68 pounds dry. I will only say this. I adapted to the Hi-Point 4595 TS more quickly than I did with the Auto Ordnance 1927 Thompson. The Hi-Point 4595 TS actually has a pretty nice feel to it once you get used to it. The cheek rest has a rise to it at the front, and if my cheek is resting on the rise at the cheekbones, the sights are just at the right height for a very clear sight picture. I would advise that you get as much of your cheek on the cheek riser as possible. However, since this 4595 TS is equipped with a 1:4 scope, a more tactical sighting position falls into place. Recoil is negligible, and the spring-loaded butt plate is actually doing something to contribute to the buffering the small amount of felt recoil. I decided, for practical purposes, to go for a 50-yard zero. Since my local indoor range maximum distance is 25 yards, that meant that if I could place a bullet at approximately 0.65 inches above the X at 25 yards, I should be as close to zero at 50 yards as I could be. This also meant that at 15 yards, I would be as close to zero as I could get. So, a 50-yard zero was well within the realm of my reality with the Hi-Point 4595 TS. Bench resting a full magazine of 230 grain FMJ to verify zero, and shooting the remainder of the rounds I had available to me offhand, showed me that the Hi-Point 4595 TS would be an excellent firearm for home defense or short-range needs. The Hi-Point 4595 TS ran without a hitch. The trigger resistance, while heavy, was quickly overcome. The operating handle is a bit tricky to work with, but more trigger time will solve any issues with that. Recoil is extremely light, and the Hi-Point 4595 tucks nicely into the shoulder. The operating handle did manage to loosen at the range. I discovered this after I got the firearm home and was checking things before cleaning. But I cleaned the threads of the operating handle, put a little dab of blue thread locker on the threads, and lightly tightened it down. The blue thread locker should help to keep the operating handle from loosening. Only further shooting will tell the story. All in all, the Hi-Point 4595 TS made for a great day at the range. The size and weight of the CZ97B works toward reducing felt recoil and muzzle flip, if I do my part and grip the pistol properly. Posting a silhouette target at 7 yards for estimating zero function, and then running some Mozambique drills for playtime, gave me an indication of what this pistol could do at a combat distance. Initial ammunition was S&B 230 grain FMJ at 853 feet per second at the muzzle. I also had some 230 grain FMJ from Georgia Ammo at 830 feet per second at the muzzle. For defensive ammunition testing, my usual Sig Sauer V-Crown 230 grain at 830 feet per second at the muzzle was also fired. The manufacturer states that for the CZ97 pistol, use some ammunition with the Revolver wad cutter type of bullet, particularly LSWC or lead semi-wad cutter, is not advisable. Use of these cartridges can cause a failure when feeding the cartridge from magazine into the chamber. When shooting, I found the grip to be more like a 1911A1, only larger, with the backstrap arch tucking nicely into the hand. I prefer a more rounded gripping area, or grip panels with a palm swell over the flat-sided aluminum grip panels. I talk about that in upgrades. The grip surface is large. If you have held or fired a Beretta 92 M9, the grip width is similar, but with a longer length. For some, it would be too large, but for me, it is near perfect. Accuracy is excellent, with the sights being POI. The rear photoluminescent sights are clear to my eyes and worked well with their faint light green coloring, while the front red fiber sight sets a contrast with the rear sights and picks up very well in daylight and range lighting. Felt recoil is negligible, feeling a bit more like a 9mm rather than a 45 ACP. The 3 pounds, 1.5 ounces of weight with 10+1 rounds of Sig Sauer V-Crown 230 grain JHP is a solid factor regarding felt recoil. Since I don't shoot 9mm ammunition that much, there was not a lot on hand. Since I have had good luck with Sig Sauer 230 grain JHP 45 ACP in my 1911, I decided to foot for a box of Sig Sauer 147 grain 9mm JHP for the G45, as well as several Hornady Custom 147 grain XTP cartridges. The Hornady was the hotter of the two defensive loads fired, but both had exceptional accuracy. The G45 ran without a hitch, which is really not surprising. The G45 is a Glock, after all. The trigger is probably the best of any Glock pistol that I have pulled. It simply rolls past through the pull rather than meeting a wall that is common to most Glock pistols. That roll makes for a very consistent trigger pull, and that aids in the accuracy department. My shooting companions that shot the G45 were also impressed by the trigger. The full grip definitely makes a difference, as does the beaver tail grip adapter. The beaver tail rests ever so gently against the top of my hand, and slide bite one less thing I have to worry about. I have to say that, even though the frame is polymer, this is one of the best feeling pistols I have yet to grip. For me, a longer trigger reach means that I have less movement with my trigger finger. Coupled with a good grip on the handle, the G45 feels like it's part of my hand, and I could tell a difference in my shooting from the first shot taken. The Glock night sights were spot on. Simply place the front dot on what you want to hit, roll the trigger back, and watch that 9mm hole appear at your POA, if you do your part. Felt recoil is mild, as compared to my 1911 in 9mm, even with its all-steel frame, even though the 1911 is the heavier pistol. The G45 is just a joy to shoot with this beaver tail grip, and I find myself not readjusting my grip as often as I do with the 1911. The G22 at the range makes for a pleasant shooting day. While the 40 Smith & Wesson is snappy, it doesn't boss you around. The size and weight of the G22, along with the polymer base of the pistol and the grip angle, keeps felt recoil to a minimum, even when firing defensive ammunition, like the Sig Sauer V-Crown 180 grain JHP, somewhere in the vicinity of 985 feet per second, or Federal Premium 180 grain Hydroshock JHP at 1,000 feet per second. MagTech 180 grain FMJ at 990 feet per second does well for range ammunition. I often say that I don't have range ammunition, but I do have ammunition that I will shoot at the range. The G22, as usual for Glock pistols, ran without malfunctions. The initial trigger pull is, and once the slack is pulled through, very smooth. The shot broke clean, with a taut felt recoil, and a less than expected muzzle flip. Now, a quick mention about my qualm with the G22. But it is just not with the G22. It's any Glock that fires a high pressure cartridge, like the 40 Smith & Wesson, 10mm, or 357 SIG. All of which have pressures up to and including 40,000 psi, according to SAMI. The Gen 5 G22 has a tad more cartridge base support than did earlier generations. Most of what I have read and viewed regarding KBs, kabooms, had to do with hand-loaded ammunition, using poor brass or hot hand-loaded cartridges. It is a fallacy that Glocks do not have supported chambers. But with that said, I have seen bulges in fired cases of 9mm ammunition at the bases due to lack of support at the 6 o'clock position with Glock barrels. In most of these Glock fails, many would speculate reloaded ammunition delivered the damage to man and machine. Moral of the story, never shoot others' reloads and be very careful with your own. The life and firearm you save may be your own. For myself, I only shoot factory ammunition, and I have had only one experience with bad factory ammunition. That cost me a single-action revolver chambered in .44 Magnum and dental work, and I will never stoke magazines with hand-loaded ammunition for defensive purposes. I am at the range after disassembling, cleaning, lubricating, and reassembling the Ruger Charger. If you remember from the last segment, the scope was removed and then remounted, which meant that I needed to see if zero was affected. Since I am using a set of Weaver lever-lock scope rings, and the scope was attached at the same point from which it was removed, zero should not be affected, theoretically. For this range session, I set the target at 25 yards, and that has been my initial zero distance for the Charger in the past. A 25-yard zero should get me within 1 inch at 50 yards without holding over, and about 1.5 inches low at 75 yards. Again, theoretically. Ammunition includes a Gia 40-grain interceptor, copper-plated hollow point at 1,470 feet per second. Remington 40-grain Thunderbolt lead round nose at 1,255 feet per second. CCI Mini-Mag 36-grain copper-plated hollow point at 1,260 feet per second. Note that a bore snake was run through the bore between a Gia, Remington, and CCI ammunition changes to give me the best results possible. And referring back to the trigger, the BX trigger was a little gritty at first, but smoothed out really well the more it was pulled. With a 2.5-pound trigger brake, this trigger is a world of difference over the standard Ruger 1022 trigger. I selected 5 brands of ammunition for this range session, and those are scrolling now. The velocities noted are for a 4-inch barrel. I felt that the selection would provide me with a range of options with which to measure felt recoil. Boy, did it. I did not bother with 185 grain fodder since I only carried 230 grain ammunition for defensive purposes. Performance was excellent with all, and all shot without a bobble. Obviously, the Georgia Arms 230 grain FNJ at 810 feet per second was the mildest of the bunch, and it is a good practice round. Once I got into the Federal 230 grain Hydra-Shot at 900 feet per second, however, felt recoil jumped considerably, and so did the muzzle. The lightweight of the Ruger Lightweight Commander let me know that I was handling something to be reckoned with. The Ruger Lightweight Commander really liked the Remington Golden Saber 230 grain fodder, and so did I. The Remington 230 grain Golden Saber provided the best group. Recoil was mild, and I think that it would be an excellent carry load in this pistol. I would reserve the Federal 230 grain Hydra-Shock and Winchester 230 grain PDX-1 for a heavier pistol than the Ruger Lightweight Commander. Although 2 7-round flush-fit magazines come with the Ruger Lightweight Commander, I had ordered several 8-round Ruger magazines for the Ruger SR 1911 on a previous occasion, and they were put into play for this range session. All magazines performed flawlessly throughout the range session. The 8-round magazines will be carried for spares. The 1911 is just a natural pointer for me, and with the exception of my human errors, all shots fired from the Ruger Lightweight Commander landed as close to POA as I could get them, using a covered POA. The Ruger Lightweight Commander really likes 230 grain and performs well with mid-range velocity ammunition. was excited about shooting this new caliber and pistol. New to me, anyway. Even though I was familiar with the 9mm and 45 ACP versions of the XDM, 10mm was a different round, but in a similar pistol. While I would fall far short of running 10,000 rounds through this pistol, I felt that a box of Cellier and Belo 180 grain FMJ with a muzzle velocity of 1164 feet per second and a muzzle energy of 543 foot-pounds, and a box of 6-hour V-Crown 180 grain JHP that has a muzzle velocity of 1250 feet per second with a muzzle energy of 624 foot-pounds would tell me how the story would go after the first range outing. Accuracy is first and foremost, second only to dependability. And of course, accuracy and dependability cannot be determined by a first outing, as it may take several outings with different kinds of ammunition before the best for the pistol is to be determined. The ammunition that I had with me would be a good indicator. The recoil is, obviously, more pronounced than a 9mm and a 40 Smith & Wesson. The sharp impulse of the recoil tells you that you are not firing a 45 ACP cartridge. That is more of a shove and less pronounced, but not by much. The recoil, however, is very close to the 45 ACP, is very manageable, and just takes some getting used to. Accuracy is no problem if the operator does their part. The sights just seem to fall into place naturally. However, while the red fiber front sight is bright in normal room lighting and outside, the overhead range lighting was not enough to bring out its brilliance. There is a good gap between the front and rear sights, enough to obtain a good sight picture, even without the front sight fiber illuminated, and that's the way the pistol was shot. The rest is just keeping them where they should be throughout the trigger pull. The sole purpose of the trigger in the XDM is to release the striker, and it does a good job doing just that. The rear sight needed no adjustment, and it seemed that the pistol was already set up for 180 grain cartridges in elevation. Put the barrel on what you want to hit, the front sight just above it, roll back the trigger while keeping that sight picture, and the pistol does the rest. As mentioned previously, the Springfield Armory XDM 5.25 and 10mm auto has some muzzle flip due to the high bore axes, and enough recoil to let you know that you're not firing a wimp cartridge. The slide comes back with authority, the recoil impacted me in the thumb web of the shooting hand. Getting back on target is no worse than when I shoot a full-size, full-weight government 1911 pistol in 45 ACP chambering. If you expect a 10mm pistol to act like a 9mm pistol, and you want or need to do a magazine dump, you may be disappointed. Recovery time, the time to get back on target, is about the same for me when shooting a 1911. The Springfield XDM 5.25 has great ergonomics that help that happen. The polymer wide grip frame helps to distribute the recoil. As expected, Springfield Armory XDM 5.25 and 10mm performed without issue. It is almost boringly predictable in its functioning. The Mega Lock grip texturing I found to be ideal. It keeps the hand in place while not aggravating the hand. Although I did wear the texture a bit on the hand after the session was over. I did not have to reposition my grip after firing each round. I just had to bring the muzzle back in line. I was firing 5-round strings just as fast as I can with my 1911 45 ACP chambering. With full power hunting loads, however, I probably would not be saying the same. Then again, I hope that I don't need to shoot 5 or more rounds in rapid succession. But when being attacked by a very angry 2- or 4-legged animal, you're going to be doing the best you can to pump as many rounds in that beast as possible, and you will have 15+1 opportunities to do so. The grip adapter that came installed on the pistol, which is the small adapter, seemed to be the right size for me, and having a grip that fits your hand is a big plus. Shooting the Springfield Armory XDM 10 5.25 with the selected loadings was a very pleasant experience. and its bark may bring some curiosity and comments from fellow shooters. I walked away from the range with a good taste in my mouth about the Springfield Armory XDm 10mm auto in 5.25 and the 10mm cartridge in general. Or it could have just been all the lead and smoke in the air. So, let me tell you how the Springfield Armory Ronin 9mm 4.25-inch pistol handles and shoots. Fortunately, I had other 1911 9mm magazines other than the one magazine provided by Springfield, both 9-round and 10-round versions to try through the Ronin. Shooting was at 7 yards to test for function and accuracy at a combat distance. Function and accuracy was tested with Fiochi 124 grain FMJ, Sig Sauer 124 grain JHP, and Sig Sauer 147 grain JHP. One magazine full of each cartridge would tell me what I need to know. As ammunition is at my expense and not donated, my range time is premium, and if I can't tell whether a firearm is a keeper or not by now, then shame on me. My experience has been that the firearm will let me know that it is good to go or needs more break-in time. I prefer heavy 9mm bullets, like the 147 grain, even though they might suffer in the velocity department. But I really wanted to see how the 147 grain Sig Sauer V-Crown JHP would perform, as it has performed well in other pistols. The recoil spring, by the way, is a 9-pound unit. Those with weak hand strength will be happy to know that the slide is easy to move rearward with the hand for loading and unloading. Using the slingshot method or using the slide lock lever to load the Ronin is very easy. For evaluation purposes, a few Mozambique drills were run with the Sig Sauer 147 grain V-Crown JHP. The trigger is stiff when new, and it comes in at an average of 5 pounds and 14 ounces. There is very little take-up before the wall is felt. Pushing through the wall drops the hammer and fires the round. Reset is quick and over-travel minimal. The trigger will smooth out overuse, and it is very crisp when the hammer is released. There is a very slight movement of the trigger within the frame, but I have felt worse in more expensive 1911s. Recoil is very light in the hand, and muzzle flip is not as pronounced as I expected. The Ronin feels very good in the hand. Magazine changes were smooth, and running several Mozambique drills garnered good results. The Ronin is very easy to handle, and the fiber front sight did well in the indoor range lighting. No errors were noted, no FTFs, no FTEs. It was finally time to go home, clean the Ronin, and fit it in a proper holster. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. It was a feeble attempt to bring you range footage of a different range, no pun intended, of firearms, one or more of which you may have an interest in. I hope that you will stick with me, as next week I am presenting a review of a very special pistol. In the meantime, stay safe out there.